Marge stood in the middle of her living room, hands on her hips, staring at the clutter that seemed to have multiplied overnight. How did she go from a tidy home to one where every surface was covered with something? It wasn't that she loved keeping junk, it just happened. The problem was, the more stuff she held onto, the heavier she felt. But the day she decided to take control, everything changed. Today, let's dive into 12 life-changing decluttering tips that will leave you feeling lighter, freer, and even younger. 1. Let go of what weighs you down. Marge stood in front of her closet, staring at rows of clothes she hadn't worn in years. Some were too tight, others were too loose, and some she had kept purely out of guilt, because she had spent good money on them, or because they held memories of days gone by. But the truth hit her like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a closet full of clothes. This was a closet full of weight. The weight of the past. The weight of someday I might wear this again. The weight of I should keep this just in case. And that weight, it was draining her. Every time she opened that closet, she felt stuck in a version of herself that no longer existed. It wasn't just clothes either. The kitchen cabinets were full of fancy appliances she never used, but felt guilty getting rid of. The drawers held stacks of old receipts, expired coupons, and greeting cards from years past. She wasn't a hoarder, she was simply a woman with a full life, who had accumulated a full house along the way. But something had to change. She wanted to feel lighter, freer, more in control of her space and her energy. So she made a decision. She didn't have to get rid of everything at once, but she did have to start. And so she picked one thing. Just one. A blouse that hadn't fit in a decade. She took it off the hanger, placed it in a donation bag, and exhaled. It was just one small action, but it felt like lifting a weight off her shoulder. 2. Start with the easy stuff. Marge knew one thing for sure. If she tried to declutter everything all at once, she'd burn out before she even made a dent. The idea of tackling the attic, the basement, or the sentimental boxes filled with old letters and photographs? Too overwhelming. She needed to ease into it. So she started small. The junk drawer. That black hole of random objects, half-used birthday candles, mismatched batteries, pens that didn't work, rubber bands, and a collection of takeout menus from restaurants she hadn't ordered from in years. She opened the drawer, took a deep breath, and got to work. And you know what? It wasn't as bad as she thought. She tossed the dead pens, recycled the old papers, and found actual useful items buried beneath the mess, like the measuring tape she thought she had lost. That small win gave her a boost of confidence. So she kept going. Next, she tackled the stack of magazines she had convinced herself she would read one day. She hadn't read them in the last 5 years, so why would she suddenly read them now? Into the recycling bin they went. Each small task built momentum. The more she let go, the easier it became. And before she knew it, she was standing in a space that felt lighter, clearer, and more manageable. 3. One room, one goal. Looking around her home, Marge knew she had one goal: to reclaim her space, one step at a time. But she also knew she couldn't do it all at once. So she made a new rule for herself: one room, one goal. She started with her bedroom, choosing the easiest spot, her nightstand. It had become a catch-all for everything: reading glasses, loose change, unread books, random lotion bottles, and a tangle of old charging cords. Instead of staring at the mess and feeling overwhelmed, she gave herself one clear, simple goal: just clean the nightstand. And she did. She kept only what she used daily and cleared everything else away. The result? A nightstand that felt peaceful and functional rather than chaotic. That one little change gave her the motivation to keep going. Next, she moved on to her dresser, then her closet, then her bookshelf. One small win at a time, she started reclaiming her home. She realized that decluttering didn't have to be exhausting. It just had to be consistent. And with every space she cleared, she felt herself becoming lighter, freer, and dare she say younger. Because when you're not buried under clutter, you have room to breathe, move, and fully enjoy life. 4. Make your home work for you. Marge had always adjusted to her home, making little compromises that over time became second nature. She bent lower to reach the pots and pans tucked into deep cabinets, stretched high to grab the spice jar hidden on the top shelf, and shuffled aside stacks of papers and odds and ends, just to find a clean spot on the table. It wasn't that she minded, she had gotten used to it, but one morning, after nearly tripping over a pile of magazines by the couch, something clicked. Why was she working so hard to accommodate her home when her home should be accommodating her? That was the day everything changed. She started by bringing the essentials to where they belonged within easy reach. No more bending, twisting, or reaching dangerously high. The coffee mugs moved from an upper cabinet to a lower shelf. The pots she used daily no longer lived in the back of a deep cupboard, but in a pull-out organizer that made them effortless to grab. Heavy ceramic baking dishes, gone, replaced with lightweight, easy-to-handle alternative. She even swapped out her bulky vacuum for a cordless one that didn't make her feel like she was dragging around a small car. Suddenly, her home felt lighter, easier, and more inviting. And the most unexpected part, she felt younger. Not just physically, but mentally. Because when your environment works with you instead of against you, life itself feels simpler, smoother, and a whole lot more joyful. 5. Stop saving for someday. Marge had always been the type to save things for someday. The fine china set tucked away in a cabinet had been waiting for the perfect occasion for decades. The craft supplies, bought with enthusiasm years ago, sat in bins collecting dust. A sewing kit she meant to use one day, still unopened. She held onto them, thinking, what if I need this someday? But then one day, she really stopped to think, how many of these somedays had actually come? The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. Someday wasn't coming. And in the meantime, all these unused items were taking up space in her home and her mind. That fancy china? It had survived years of waiting, but for what? To stay locked away while she ate from the same old plates every day. That made no sense. So she made a decision. She would start using the things she loved now. Out came the china for a Tuesday night dinner. Just because, the craft supplies. She gifted them to a young neighbor who loved art. And the sewing kit, she donated it to a community center where someone would actually put it to good use. And do you know what happened? She didn't feel like she was losing anything. Instead, she felt free. Free from the weight of objects she was saving for a future that never seemed to arrive. Free from the mental clutter of maybe one day. Her home finally reflected her present life, not a hypothetical future. And that, in itself, was a breath of fresh air. 6. The 1-year rule. At first, the idea of letting go of things made Marge a little uneasy. After all, some of those items had been with her for years. But she decided to test out a simple question. Have I used this in the last year? If the answer was yes, it stayed. But if the answer was no, she had to be honest with herself. She didn't really need it. She started small. That old waffle maker she kept just in case she ever felt like making homemade waffles. She hadn't touched it in 3 years. The extra set of guest towels that had been sitting in a closet, unused since she moved in, they were still in their original packaging. And don't even get her started on the box of tangled holiday lights. She had bought new ones last Christmas, because she couldn't even untangle the old ones. So out they went, and surprisingly, she never missed them. Not once. In fact, she felt lighter. It was as if, with every unneeded item she let go of, she also let go of the tiny burden of keeping it. And when she looked around her home, she didn't see clutter anymore. She saw space, ease, and clarity. She saw a home that was no longer filled with forgotten things, but with items she truly used, loved, and enjoyed. And that was the most refreshing feeling of all. Make decluttering fun, not a chore. Marge had spent years thinking of decluttering as a chore, something that required grit, sweat, and a lot of groaning. The kind of task you put off until one day when you finally feel like tackling it. But here's the thing, that day never comes. There's always something more exciting, more urgent, or simply less exhausting to do instead. So instead of treating decluttering like a punishment, Marge decided to turn it into an event. She brewed herself a cup of her favorite tea, put on music that made her feel energized and happy, and got to work. It wasn't long before she realized that decluttering didn't have to be all stress and no fun, especially when she invited a friend to help. One afternoon, her longtime friend Diane came over, and together they tackled a closet full of old clothes, shoes, and forgotten handbags. With every piece they pulled out, there was a memory to share. That floral dress from the 80s, remember when I wore this to your anniversary party? The pair of shoes that had seen better days? These were my dancing shoes back in the day. Before they knew it, what could have been a dreaded afternoon of sorting through old things had turned into a trip down memory lane, one that was filled with laughter, storytelling, and some truly questionable fashion choices from decades past. And the best part, decluttering didn't feel like drudgery anymore. It felt like an act of celebration, a way of honoring the past while making room for the future. Instead of dreading the process, Marge looked forward to it, because each session left her feeling lighter, freer, and surprisingly nostalgic in the best way. 8. Find a new home for old treasures. Not everything in Marge's home was junk. Some things were too special to just throw away. But keeping them hidden in boxes wasn't exactly honoring them either. What was the point of keeping a beautiful old quilt tucked away in a storage bin? Or holding on to a stack of first edition books if they were just collecting dust? The more she thought about it, the more she realized treasures are meant to be shared, not buried in forgotten corners. So she started finding new homes for old treasures. Her granddaughter loved vintage jewelry. So Marge carefully selected a few cherished pieces, ones she rarely wore but had sentimental value, and gifted them to her. The joy on her granddaughter's face, worth more than any sentimental attachment Marge had to keeping them locked in a drawer. The beautiful china set she had been saving for a special occasion, but never actually used, she passed it on to her niece, who loved hosting dinner parties. The books she had collected over the years, the ones she had already read and enjoyed, she donated them to the local library, where they could bring joy to someone else. Each time she gifted or donated something, Marge felt lighter, not sadder, because now instead of being hidden away, these items were being used, appreciated, and loved. And that, she realized, was a much better way to honor them than keeping them stuffed in a box in the attic. 9. Set a decluttering routine. Clutter wasn't something that happened overnight. It built up slowly, quietly, almost without notice. A magazine here, a stack of mail there, a drawer that started as just a little messy and turned into a full-blown disaster zone. Marge had always been good at tidying up, but she had never built a system to keep clutter from creeping back in. So she made a new rule. Every Sunday she would spend 15 minutes decluttering just one small area. 15 minutes wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't a massive project. It was doable. One week she tackled the kitchen junk drawer. How did she have so many rubber bands? Another week she went through her bathroom cabinet. No one needs that many expired lotions. One drawer, one shelf, one little space at a time. It all added up. What surprised her the most was how easy it became. Instead of waiting until clutter took over, she was staying ahead of it. That overwhelming feeling she used to get when she thought about organizing, gone. For the first time in years, she felt completely in control of her home, not buried under the weight of things she didn't even realize were there. And the best part? Decluttering wasn't an event anymore. It was just part of life. A habit like watering plants, or going for a walk, something she actually enjoyed because it left her feeling clear-headed, peaceful, and more at home in her own space than ever before. 10. Everything needs a home. Before, Marge would set things down anywhere, thinking she'd put them away later. But later never came. Now, she made sure everything had a designated place. Her keys by the door, her mail in a tray, her shoes in a basket. Tidying up became effortless, because there was no more guesswork. 11. Release guilt, not just stuff. One of the hardest things for Marge, letting go of gifts she never used, the sweater she never wore, the knickknacks she didn't like, the fancy candle set collecting dust. But she realized something. Holding on to things out of guilt wasn't fair to her or the giver. She donated them, knowing someone else would appreciate them more. 12. Enjoy the freedom you've created. Marge stood in her newly decluttered home, took a deep breath, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Light, free, energized. With less stuff weighing her down, she had more space, more peace, more time to focus on what truly mattered. And for the first time in a long time, she felt younger. Decluttering isn't about losing things. It's about gaining freedom. Just like Marge, you deserve a home that feels light, open, and easy to live in. Which of these tips will you try first? Let me know in the comments. And remember, your best years aren't behind you, they're right in front of you.